WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
And welcome to this live 1 hour edition of OTR this morning. I'm Ed Harding, along with News 35's political reporter, Sharman Sacchetti. And as you can see, we are joined this morning by Massachusetts Congressman Stephen Lynch, and we are going to be discussing a historic moment here in the United States, the criminal indictment of a president, period, former or current, Donald Trump.
All right, so let's catch you up on where things stand right now. The felony indictment was filed under seal, so we don't know exactly what the charges are. The case is tied to alleged hush money payments to adult film actress Stormy Daniels during the 2016 presidential race.
Closing in at 11:01 up here in Boston, live 11:01 in the morning down in West Palm Beach, Florida. You are looking live at the Trump plane. That's where the former president's plane is sitting, as you can see on standby. It's clear to see on the front end of the plane. It says Trump. It's expected to take him from Florida to New York tomorrow. It's expected he will face the charges on Tuesday sometime in the afternoon. He has called the case a witch hunt, and he says he will fight the charges.
All right, Congressman Lynch, let's get your assessment of this moment in time right now.
Well, I think it's right to point out, as you have, Sharman, that this is a sealed indictment. We don't know what the charges are, so we should exercise a little bit of caution in assuming what's in there. But there are two related cases, the Cohen case and also the Weisselberg case. Weisselberg was the chief financial officer, and of course, Michael Cohen was the personal attorney. Mm-hmm. And we know a lot of facts of those two trials. A lot of the documents that were submitted in those trials are relevant to this indictment that is coming up this week. So we do know that, you know, it was the hush money payments and perhaps some tax-related consequences and campaign finance-related
but if
issues.
If you take them one step at a time, a hush money payment, does that rise to the level of a felony charge? It doesn't in the state of New York, by the way.
Well, it's for the purpose of, you know, it carries over into the campaign, right? Because these payments were made in days before the election, in the weeks before the election. So it was the $2,700 limit for campaign contributions is exceeded by the $130,000 that was paid to keep these stories out of the campaign. So that's how some of these issues are related.
Can I just get your thoughts about an ex-president getting indicted? This has never before happened in history.
Yeah. It's not good. It's not good. But I don't know if there are any good choices here. You've already prosecuted the chief financial officer. You've already prosecuted and put in jail the attorney for the president. Do you just give him a pass? So, you know, the idea that no one is above the law, I think that's at stake here.
Well, look at what would appear to be ahead. It would be an appearance in the court in Lower Manhattan. It would be a booking photo, which the state of New York doesn't release, but we all know it is going to be revealed. We are going to see what it looks like. The former president was going to be fingerprinted. Right now, we do not believe he's going to be handcuffed. I'm wondering if the indignities of all of that are connected to a president.
Well, look, you're right. I think there could be overreach here. There's no reason to cuff or shackle the president, in the former president in this case. He's not accused of a violent crime. There's no reason to believe he's going to flee. He's running for president again, right. So he's going to do that from within the country. You know, so there's the danger of overreaching on the part of the district attorney, and I think he has to treat the former president with a certain amount of respect and dignity as someone who is charged. Remember, he's been accused. This is an indictment on probable cause. He's not been convicted, so he gets the benefit of that, and he has legal counsel. And he'll be able to defend himself in a court of law.
Well, let me ask you about the Republican response, because we are hearing from some folks, Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, Kevin McCarthy. They're all saying that this is politically motivated. Yeah. Do you buy that?
No. That's patently ridiculous. You have these other two cases, right, where someone's gone to jail and Weisselberg.
Referring to Cohen and Weisselberg, yeah.
Right. So obviously, people who say he did nothing wrong, this is a witch hunt, it's all political, they're flatly wrong. There was wrongdoing here. The debate is, you know, his status as a president former president as a presidential candidate should there be some forbearance because of those facts. And the district attorney of the Southern District of New York decided no. And so he's going forward, and he's acting within the law. So all the criticism against him, look, he's following the law.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, who serves in the chamber with you, says that she will go to New York on Tuesday. She will protest, she's an American, so there's no question there. But she also has called for a divorce between red states and blue states. So does the indictment just ramp up the political divide?
If you listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene, yes. But I think there are a lot of other people on the Democratic side and the Republican side that are trying to take a much more measured and reasonable approach to all of this. We're not fanning the flames. We're trying to let the legal process work itself out. And again, the president has not been convicted. He will be able to defend himself in a court of law, and he should have that opportunity.
What does this mean with so many other investigations that appear to be, I think, to the average person, that appear to be more serious, election interference, that sort of thing, anything related to January 6th, that this is the first indictment to come out? What does that say? Well,
these are parallel tracks, right? So we don't. This is a state criminal proceedings. I have no part in this.
Right.
But there is also, as you mentioned, the Georgia case of election interference and another prosecution as well. So there are three going on at the same time, and they're not coordinating with each other. They're independent instances of misconduct.
So how do you think, as you build the building blocks toward the 2024 presidential race, how does this? I mean, as we sit right now, Donald Trump is the Republican frontrunner in this race right now.
Right. Well, I think it's whether or not the prosecutors overreach here and create a sympathetic figure in Donald Trump, or, on the other hand, as facts come out and the trial moves forward, it could be very damaging as well.
Do you think this makes, from your perspective, anything a little more tough to get things done in Congress, especially in the House?
Well, we're pretty divided already.
That was a long sigh you just started.
So I'm not sure this makes things worse. It is a distraction, however. As you see some members of Congress lining up on either side, it does create a point of contention.
And they're lining up vociferously too, and maybe some might be surprised that Ron DeSantis is lining up to at least publicly stand in defense of Donald Trump after what those two are going through right now.
Well, I think Mr. DeSantis is trying to curry favor, as some of the other Republican candidates and office holders are trying to curry favor with that core base that are so adamantly supportive of the former president.
So you believe that's just a political move, which
Sure.
should not be surprising. Last thing I'll ask you about this, and Sharman mentioned it about the other cases that are sitting, the case in Georgia, any potential repercussions from January 6th, the documents. This in New York is the first indictment. Do you think that more Trump indictments are coming?
It's possible. It's possible. Again, those prosecutors are going to have to make a decision at the final moment, and this prosecution might have something to do with their decisions as they see how this unfolds. So we'll just have to wait and see.
He has fundraised. His campaign says he's raised millions already
$4 million
off this.
Just in the 24 hours after it.
I noticed the crowds are smaller. The reaction is much different than it was, before January 6th.
Congressman, thank you for coming in live this morning. And may I say happy birthday?
Thank you.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Be safe in New York.
Be safe. Thank you very much.
Both of you.